This week on Choice Hacking.
Hold the elevator!
Elevators have been pretty common since the mid-1800s. And when the skyscraper business began booming in the 1940s, elevators were a critical piece of technology that made huge towers like New York's Empire State Building possible. But this amazing new technology also came with its own set of problems. People would complain because the elevators were too slow. They just seemed to take forever to get there. The building managers of these post-war high-rises and skyscrapers explored making the elevators faster so people would stop complaining. But that would have cost tens of thousands of dollars and only shaved a few seconds off the wait time. It seemed like the world was doomed to be bored waiting on their lift, until one building had a genius solution. They put mirrors inside and outside elevators. Now people could check out their hair and their makeup while they waited. The complaints about slow elevators, well, they disappeared overnight. People suddenly didn't notice the wait. But why did mirrors kill these slow elevator complaints? It's down to a psychological principle known as idleness aversion. I'm Jennifer Clinehens, and you're listening to Choice Hacking, a podcast about applying behavioral science and psychology to business, marketing, experience design, and more. Join me today as we examine idleness aversion and how you can use it to perfect your marketing and your customer experience. But first, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this podcast, Choice Hacking Academy's most popular course, Behavioral Science and Psychology 101 for Marketers. If you're in a business that cares about customers, then you need to understand how they think, feel, and act, so your work will be more meaningful and effective. With step-by-step video lessons and more than 175 real-world examples of marketing psychology at work, you'll leave this course feeling ready to craft more meaningful, effective, and persuasive marketing with science, not guesswork. And you'll even get a blockchain-registered course certificate to share on your resume or your LinkedIn. To learn more and decide if it's right for you, visit choicehacking.com/101. That's choicehacking.com/101. Now on to the show. Idleness aversion is a psychological principle that says people are happier when they're busier, even if we're forced to be busy. University of Chicago researcher Chris C. described idleness aversion this way in his paper, Idleness Aversion and the Need for Justifiable Busyness. He said, people dread idleness, yet they need a reason to be busy. C and his research team had two ideas about idleness aversion that they wanted to test. One, that people would rather be busy than doing nothing. Two, busyness, for any reason, makes us happier. So they conducted an experiment. The research team asked college students to leave all of their belongings with a facilitator, so cell phones, books, backpacks, whatever else they had with them, so they could fill out a few surveys. Once they finished the first survey, they were told to wait for 15 minutes to get the next survey. During that 15-minute wait, they were asked to drop off their completed first survey in a second location. Students had a choice of two drop-off locations. One was right outside the room, and another was about a 6 or 7 minute walk away. Here's where it gets interesting. The students were told that they had to wait out the remaining 15 minutes before they could get their next survey. And remember, they don't have a cell phone, a book, or any other form of distraction. So by choosing the drop-off location right outside the room, they were basically signing up to twiddle their thumbs for 15 minutes. But if they chose the 15-minute round trip to the second location, they'd at least be distracted by the walk. Once the students chose and the 15 minutes were up, they were given a survey with only one question. How good did you feel in the last 15 minutes? Busy participants, so the ones who chose to walk 15 minutes to drop off their surveys, felt happier than the ones who dropped their survey off and then had to stand around and wait for 15 minutes. And in a second separate experiment, the researchers found that even students who were given no choice and were forced to be busy were happier than the students who did nothing. This is all really interesting, but how can marketers, entrepreneurs, and designers apply these findings? Well, here are a few famous examples of brands using idleness aversion to their advantage. Known for their long lines, Disney Parks spends millions making waiting in line fun. Queues have puzzles, music, and interactive designs. For example, when you're waiting in line for the Haunted Mansion at Disney World, you can play ghostly musical instruments, you can see books that fly from their shelves, and even solve a murder mystery while you wait in line. As MIT professor Dick Larson, who studies the psychology of standing in line, put it, you might wait 45 minutes for an 8-minute ride at Disney World, but they'll make you feel as if the ride has started when you're in line. Disney are masters of cueing psychology. They know that you can't just keep people entertained in line. People also have to feel like the line is moving. That sense of progress is important to keeping people focused on fun, not standing in line. That's also why Disney hides the length of its lines by snaking them through the landscape or wrapping them around the sides of buildings. That way, you never look at the hundreds of people in front of you and feel discouraged because of how long you think the wait is going to take. You're entertained by your surroundings instead of staring at the massive queue and mentally calculating how long you think it's going to take. Streaming service Netflix made an attempt at idleness aversion, which actually became notorious. Their strategy of auto-playing TV show and movie trailers when users paused on the title for just a second is the most controversial example of idleness aversion that I've come across. Autoplay was designed to get your mind off of finding something to watch and instead get you instantly engaging with new shows and movies. Spending hours debating what to watch becomes a lot easier when you're entertained by clips and trailers, even if the trade-off between annoyance and engagement wasn't always worth it. Thankfully, you can now disable this feature, but Netflix clearly saw some kind of benefit from the years when it was the default experience. And it really put the idea of being happier, even when you're forced to be busy, to the test. Last, let's talk about Uber. So the story of Uber begins in the year 2008. And that's when friends and co-founders, Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp, were attending a tech conference in Paris. One freezing night, they couldn't get a cab. While they were shivering on a cobblestone street waiting for their ride, they had a revelation. Not knowing when or if you'll find a cab stinks. It was in this stressed-out moment that a simple question created Uber. Kalanick and Camp asked themselves, what if you could request a cab on your phone? Even in its earliest days, Uber used psychology to create a killer insight that waiting on a taxi cab is an emotional roller coaster. And waiting on an Uber, especially if you're visiting a new town or it's raining outside, can seem to take forever. Waiting can be a stressful situation, and Uber knows that this moment in their experience has an outsized bearing on how good or bad a user rates their experience. So Uber's behavioral science team experimented with keeping users entertained with a live car animation that shows you where your driver is in real time. It gives you information, it provides transparency, but most importantly, it keeps you entertained and thinking about something that isn't waiting for your Uber. Designs that employ idleness aversion are all around us, from crowns and coloring mats for kids at restaurants to progress bars on websites. We're surrounded by little things that entertain, engage, and misdirect us from the pain of waiting. And while they can sometimes create a much better experience, like in Disney World's entertaining queues, they can also make for a much worse experience, like Netflix's much-hated autoplay. If you want to apply idleness aversion to your experience, start by asking yourself a few questions. First, where are there moments of boredom or psychological pain? Do users or customers need to wait while something is done or for something to become available? How can we best address that psychological pain? Can we entertain? Can we engage? Or can we misdirect? And most importantly, do our ideas to apply idleness aversion add value to the customer, like Disney or Uber, or do they annoy them, like Netflix? Thank you for listening to the Choice Hacking Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on social media. It takes me 20 plus hours to put together every episode, and it is a huge help when you share an episode with your LinkedIn, Twitter, or even your TikTok followers. And don't forget, you can learn more about behavioral science and psychology applied to business when you subscribe to the free Choice Hacking newsletter. You'll join more than 7,000 brilliant UX, CX, and marketing folks from companies like Google, Coke, and Disney who get my newsletter. To sign up, just visit choicehacking.com/subscribe. That's choicehacking.com/subscribe. Until next time.
I hit record a drop, you can't ignore it. I'm transforming now these cars and planes, I'm always boarding. Just out touring down in Charlotte like I play for Hornets.